Good afternoon. Today we welcome Mr. Michael Boren of Idaho to the committee as we consider his nomination to be Undersecretary for the Natural Resources and Environment, or NRE, mission area at the Department of Agriculture. The forest and grasslands of the United States Forest Service serve a variety of functions: wildlife habitat, outdoor recreation, oil, gas, minerals, and timber. I look forward to hearing from Mr. Boren on how he views this multiple-use mandate for the Forest Service. I'm concerned that recent years have seen a reduction in the priority for timber. However, I'm pleased with some of the actions President Trump and USDA have taken to try and address this problem. Utilizing our forests to sequester carbon also requires responsibility by harvesting timber and properly managing our forests, which provide an almost unlimited resource, resulting in a win-win for everyone. When timber is harvested and ultimately stored in lumber and other end products, that carbon is preserved almost permanently. Perhaps an even better way our forests can serve our nation's environmental powerhouse is by preventing and mitigating future catastrophic wildfires. There's a statistic I know we've all heard before, but it's still astounding to me. California wildfires in 2020 released twice as many greenhouse emissions from the state, produced twice as many greenhouse emissions than the state reduced between 2003 and 2019. Properly managing our nation's forests can do more to prevent carbon emissions than almost anything else we can do in Congress. Thankfully, this committee is currently considering the Fix Our Forest Acts, and we hope to move this forward in the very near future and get this legislation signed into law. FOFA will provide the right tools and processes for our federal land management agencies, including the U.S. Forest Service, to mitigate the frequency and intensity of catastrophic wildfires. If confirmed as Undersecretary of the USDA mission area that oversees the Forest Service, the committee will look to you to quickly implement FOFA and follow congressional intent. Your leadership and background will be critical in ensuring the Forest Service is efficient and effective in carrying out the critical job of the mission area. Doing this successfully will ensure that all Americans can enjoy the benefits of our nation's forests and grasslands for years to come. I expect that Congress and this committee will be able to work with Mr. Boren and rely on his professionalism and candor as we conduct necessary oversight over the multitude of programs and efforts under his purview. We expect you and your team will be prompt in our request and work with the committee to provide needed information and technical assistance. We will trust your experience and expertise to steward our national forest over the course of your time, should you be confirmed as Undersecretary. Mr. Boren, I want to again congratulate you on your nomination to be Undersecretary for Natural Resources and Environment at USDA, and we look forward to hearing from you today. I now turn to our ranking member, Senator Klobuchar, for her opening statement.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Senator Risch. Thank you for coming here, and to the nominee as well. So I spoke with Mr. Boren. I appreciated that very much. And I'd like to welcome his family, including his wife, Joan, and his father, Robert Boren, and two of his children and daughter-in-law, who I understand are here. Mr. Boren, if confirmed, you will oversee the U.S. Forest Service, which is, as we all know, responsible for managing 193 million acres of forest and grassland. You'll be considered for this position at a critical time for the Forest Service. We mentioned, as the chairman mentioned, the wildfires in California, which of course created just unimaginable harm. I will note sometimes there's smaller fires as well that can quickly get out of control, as I talked about, Mr. Boren. I've appreciated the Forest Service work, as I told Secretary Rollins, working with the state of Minnesota in just the last few weeks to contain fires in northern Minnesota that quickly spread to acres and acres. We currently have fires in Canada that are not really close to our state in terms of burning forests, but are creating huge smoke issues in a lot of parts of the United States, with more to come. The Forest Service has an important multiple-use mandate to manage lands for timber, recreation, watershed health, and more. And USDA's and Interior's focus on wildlife suppression and prevention are very important right now. A critical part of reducing wildfire risks is the Forest Service and its partners carrying out more forest management, and I recognize the USDA recently released an active forest management strategy, and I welcome its focus on increasing the use of Good Neighbor Authority, a bill that I had worked on for years, and other partnership agreements. Mr. Boren, if confirmed, you'll be responsible for implementing these recent directives and for responding to wildfires. I do remain concerned about the Forest Service's capacity to carry out the important work to reduce wildlife risk and severity. The Forest Service has reportedly lost more than 4,000 employees since January, and my office has received reports of Forest Service contracts having been canceled and delayed, including some projects focused on reduction of wildfire risk. Workforce reductions and disruptions in funding and contracts raise questions about the Forest Service's ability to balance its many responsibilities. These are concerns I've raised in several communications with the USDA and need clarity from the agency. The administration's proposed budget that just came out also contributes to the uncertainty. The budget makes deep cuts in National Forest Service system funding, popular programs that strengthen state and private sector capacity for managing forests, and forestry research. This is confusing following recent testimony to this committee from the Forest Service on the need to rely on state and private partners. The budget also recommends moving wildland fire operations to the Department of Interior from the USDA's Forest Service. While I'm open to reviewing the details of this proposal, I'm concerned it would hurt the Forest Service's ability to execute wildfire mitigation and other land management work. Mr. Boren, these proposals raise questions about the Forest Service's approach to overseeing the wildfire crisis that we're seeing in so many states, as my colleague Senator Bennett knows, and from his home state of Colorado, and managing Forest Service lands. I look forward to hearing more about how, if confirmed, you will work to ensure the Forest Service addresses these challenges and how you will ensure our national forests remain a place for all Americans to enjoy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my 1 minute to Senator Risch.
I'll take it. Thank you.
Senator Elvin wanted to know what job we were confirming Senator Risch for.
You should be so lucky to vote on this.
Today, we are more than pleased to have our good friend and colleague, Senator Risch, with us, who truly is a champion of agriculture and rural America throughout this country. He will be introducing our nominee, Mr. Michael Boren. Thank you for being here again, Senator Risch, and please proceed.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to get even with you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to yourself and the ranking member for having me here today. I think you've introduced more people in I've got more nominees in my committee than any of the other committees, and I think you've introduced more of them than anybody else. I was thinking of getting you your own chair in the committee room. But thank you for being here, and it's a great honor to do this. For a lot of different reasons. Obviously, forestry is a passion of mine. My undergraduate degree was in forest management, forestry and forest management. We haven't had Idaho fingerprints on the Forest Service since I was governor. When I was governor, we had one of my classmates actually was chief of the Forest Service. We're going to have a chief of the Forest Service from Idaho, and of course, this position now from Idaho. And it's so important because people, particularly if you live east of the Mississippi, it's hard to fathom that our state is owned by 2/3 by the federal government. 2 out of every 3 acres in the state of Idaho is owned by the federal government. And so it's an entirely different ballgame doing business there, commerce and everything else. And particularly when the state is cut its teeth on mining and on forestry and those kinds of things. It's very difficult to operate sometimes with the federal government. They're not always the best neighbors in the world. Most federal employees are good people, hardworking people, well-intentioned people, but there are some that make being a neighbor with the federal government challenging. Turning to the nominee, President Trump has picked, I think, the right person for this job. If you go into his background, obviously he's been a very successful person in the business sector. But beyond that, he has a considerable roots in the forest. And he started as a teenager working with the Forest Service and doing business with the Forest Service. And it followed his family. His father had quite a lot of dealings with the Forest Service, which he will talk about in his opening statement, as did his wife's grandfather, I believe it was. So he comes at it from a couple different ways. One of the things I'm sure that you're going to ask him about is there's been a lot of media about disagreements he's had with the federal government. And I can tell you that in Idaho, where we have all this federal land, there are pieces of ground called inholdings. If you're from the east of the Mississippi, you've never heard of the word inholdings. But when you're from out west, as a lot of our members are, they know what an inholding is. And I can tell you, most federal people, when you talk to them, will not concede that they're not very. Senator, don't you want to hear the rest of this, Chuck? Sorry. But I've listened to you over these years, and I can't understand. No. Yeah. He takes things literally, you know. In any event, when you have inholdings, usually the BLM and the Forest Service are not really happy with inholdings, and they aren't always the best neighbor. To be honest with you, I've never, and I've dealt with these kind of problems when I was governor in my decades in the state senate. I dealt with a lot of people that had problems with the BLM or the Forest Service who had inholdings, and they were disputes that really should have been resolved like good neighbors resolve them, but instead they turn into public debates, and it can be difficult and reaches a fever pitch at times. But I've never yet run into anybody that has an inholding, and they're relatively common in the West. I've never run into anybody that has an inholding property that hasn't had some disagreement with their neighbor, the federal government. So I'm sure you'll want to ask him questions about this, and I'm sure he'll explain these to you. But these are difficult things, and he has a considerable amount of land that is in an inholding. And as I say, he'll be able to explain to you the disputes that he's had with the federal government on these. But look, this is the right guy for this job. I commend the President of the United States for choosing him for this particular position, and I would commend his nomination to you, and I know that you will look at this favorably and civilly when you deal with him. So thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could be excused, please, I've got another meeting I have to go.
I guess we'll let you go. So
Senator Klobuchar, you are not going to cross-examine me if that's what you're thinking.
Looking so inviting.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you for being.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
We know you're busy. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you.
Okay, I will now administer the oath and then begin with witness testimony. You'll have 5 minutes. Please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the statement you are about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes. Do you agree that if confirmed, you will respond to requests to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of the Senate? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Boren. You are now recognized for your statement.
Thank you, Chairman Boozman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and members of the committee. It's a real honor to be here today to appear before you, and I've had a very pleasant opportunity to meet some of you in your offices and learn some good things about your states and about what you're concerned with. If confirmed, it will be a privilege for me to spend time working with you as you exercise your responsibilities and authorities and oversight with the Forest Service and the Department of Agriculture. I'm thankful to President Donald Trump and to Secretary Brooke Rollins for the trust they've placed in me in this nomination. I think they're very inspiring people, and I hope you will give me the opportunity to work for them. May I introduce my wife, and partner of 41 years. It's been a really interesting ride. Meeting Joan at a church dance changed my life. It made it harder. It made it so much more worthwhile, and it gave me so much more reason to be the best that I could be. Joan and I have a life of adventure. It's so many times we look at each other at the end of a day and say truthfully, just another best day ever. We've had some great days. We've had hard days, and they've been great days. My father, Robert Boren, a retired professor and Forest Service employee and consultant with the Forest Service for many, many years, is with us today. I'm really pleased to have him here. He spent many days in the forest since 1937, when he first got to the forest. My mother died in 2012 after 54 years of marriage to my father. She was a really great example to me. She was a true pioneer, and she spent her life serving other people. And I'm glad to have known her and to have been her son, to be her son. Joan and I have 3 children. 2 of them are able to be here today, Jack and Amanda. And Jack's wife, Ashley, is here as well. And Amanda is here with her daughter, my granddaughter, Stevie, one of 9 grandchildren that we've had, 1 a year for 9 years. So it's been quite a ride there as well. I love my grandchildren and my children, and I will do everything I can to preserve the beauty and the opportunity and the freedom that is America for them. And that's why I'm here today, among other reasons. But I'm here to serve my children and your children and grandchildren. I'm thankful to be supported by many friends and family members. Some of them are here today, and many more of them are watching live, and I'm glad to have their support. The United States Forest Service has always been a part of my life. I remember some of my earliest memories are when my father was working for the Clayton Ranger District in central Idaho in the summers. And he spent long hours there. There was too much to do and too few employees. I know that seems surprising that we're back to that today, but I think it's maybe always the case. And somehow he and the ranger got it done. And I have to say, the ranger to me was larger than life. That was the really important person in our county, and I really looked up to him. Later in his life, my father worked for the Forest Service and the Interagency Fire Center, which is based in Boise, Idaho, as a consultant, and I had a lot of time to learn things from him about that as well, and I feel like I have a pretty good grounding in some of the challenges and opportunities of the Forest Service. As Senator Rich mentioned, my brother Dave and I worked as teenagers. We had a business buying logs from the Forest Service and cutting them up into posts and poles and selling them to neighboring ranches. That was so successful that the next year we decided to make more money, we would be GS1 level employees of the Forest Service and plant trees. And that went pretty well. So we have some experience there. I have accessed the forest in almost every way you can imagine, on foot, on horseback, skis, snowshoes, snowcats, snowmobiles, every kind of conveyance from motorcycles to ATVs to UTVs, four-wheel drives, and motorized and non-motorized boats, and especially aircraft and helicopters. And I can tell you it's given me a real appreciation for the difficulty of maintaining and increasing and improving access to the forests for the general public. And this is a very important issue for me because I believe that when people go to the forest, it's a spiritual experience, it's an awakening, and it's a patriotic experience for them. And I want to make sure they have that opportunity. My wife's grandfather, Leonard Berg, who Senator Rich mentioned, worked for the Forest Service his whole career and ended his career here in Washington, D.C., and I really admired him. But I also have recognized his abilities and strengths and integrity in many of the employees of the Forest Service with whom I hope to be able to work. Looks like I'm about out of time. I could tell you more about my career and my background, but I feel that I'm uniquely positioned to support the Forest Service in its role, and I think that it will be a blessing to work for the Forest Service if you confirm me to this position. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I ask my questions, I'd like to add letters in support of Mr. Boren's nomination into the record, as well as a statement from Senator Crapo, who has a conflict. He's, as you know, Chairman of Finance and is busy right now. Without objection, so ordered. I'll go ahead and start. Due to the rise of catastrophic fires across the United States, federal and state land management agencies and private forestry owners recognize the need to increase the pace and scale of hazardous fuels reductions on federal lands and cross-boundary landscapes. Mr. Boren, what is your view of Forest Service's role on forest management tools like timber production that can prevent catastrophic wildfires? How can the Forest Service proactively manage our forest to promote wildfire resiliency?
The Forest Service has, thank you, Senator, for that question and for having me here. The Forest Service has many tools available to it to manage the forests, to sustain their health and diversity and productivity. And I think we should use all of them. In particular, the tools relating to timber production, which are important not only for making the forest more healthy and more resilient and fire resistant, but also for revenue to the government of the United States and therefore its people, and also to be able to use those organizations to take care of some of our trails and roads. So it's really important to produce timber. It's also important to reduce fuel accumulation where timber isn't the best way to do it, or to do it in conjunction with that. And I feel like that is something that is really well done in coordination with timber producers and other groups. And we can look in particular to state forestry organizations to see some of the good things that they've done.
Very good. Across the western United States, the checkerboard pattern of land ownership between public, private, and tribal landowners creates confusion and limits active management of the forest. These limitations can negatively impact our national forest. How do you view these cross-boundary issues, and how can the Forest Service engage with other public and private land managers?
Well, as a private landowner, I know the checkerboard nature of the West is difficult, because it doesn't matter what you do on your own land in terms of noxious weeds reduction and prevention, or in terms of fire prevention. Your neighbors need to be involved. And I think there have been some really good things that you in Congress have done over the past few years along those lines. I know there's an interesting checkerboard project for fuels reduction in California today, with Sierra Pacific Industries and possibly with other companies, that is a good example of how the public and private landowners can get together to deal with fuels reduction and other methods of mitigation, and I would think we could do a lot more of that.
Timber sales from national forests benefit many stakeholders by mitigating wildfires, preventing pest and disease outbreaks, and supporting the economy of local communities. Unfortunately, many mills are struggling due to fluctuations in the amount of timber from our forest and the demand for forest products. What is your view on the value of timber sales when it comes to supporting rural economies and forest management? And what can the Forest Service play in supporting mills, which is with a steady supply of timber?
I've seen firsthand the problems that come with lack of timber production and the things that happen to rural communities when they lose a timber mill, a lumber mill. And I realize that it's very difficult these days to add new lumber mills to replace the old ones. And one of the reasons is the cost is really high. It costs maybe $300 million to build a good, successful lumber mill. And nobody's willing to do that if they don't have a guarantee of production to be able to maintain their mill for a long period of time. And so while it's very important to support our rural communities by producing more timber, by selling more timber, if there's no one to buy it, if there's no one to process it, you can't have that mill. You can't build those economies. And so we need to do more than just say we're going to produce more timber. We need to encourage long-term contracts with mill owners so that they have a reason to believe that they can invest $300 million in a mill and make a living out of it over the long term. We need to work with with other entities, state forests, for example, and private forests, to help find ways to grow our rural economies by providing them a steady supply of timber.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Senator Boozman. I think I'll start with the staffing issue I raised in the opening, just with the thousands of employees that have left and terminated. They took, there was deferred resignation plans, and then the White House's direction to federal agencies to plan for additional layoffs. Mr. Boren, how will you ensure resignations and terminations will not affect the ability of the Forest Service to prevent and address the dangers of wildfires?
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. That's a very important point. We certainly need to have an appropriate level of staff to fulfill our mission. I have not had an experience with the Forest Service yet where I understand what the staffing levels are and how they're being applied, but I am very familiar with resource-constrained organizations, having worked in one and for one that I started for many years, where we started with a very small amount of money and never really had enough to do what we needed to do. I certainly wouldn't say that that guarantees that I'll be able to figure it out immediately at the Forest Service, but I know that we have to live with the resources that we receive, and we will find a way to do that.
Okay. And the present budget proposes moving wildland fire management outside of the USDA. This is a significant responsibility of the Forest Service that would be transferred to the Department of Interior, and I understand some have questions about the impact on this, on managing wildfire responses. Could you talk about how this proposal could affect the agency's fire mitigation work, like prescribed burns, and how you will work with states, tribes, and employees and other interested parties as this proposal is considered?
I have questions as you do. I don't fully understand the proposal and how it's intended to work. I do have a background through my father and through living in Boise, Idaho, and visiting the Interagency Fire Center, and through being a firefighter and working with incident management teams, where it's very clear to me that cooperation with other agencies and other organizations is the way to fight fire. And I'm sure that if this transfer occurs, the Forest Service will still be intimately involved, since that organization is responsible for most of the federal forests and a large chunk of grasslands, and responsible for keeping them in good condition.
Exactly. And so, yep. Thank you. That's part of why I'm so worried about this. And thanks for mentioning that, because as you acknowledge here, the Forest Service is charged with managing forests and watersheds, wildlife habitat, and these are responsibilities of the Forest Service. Could you very quickly, because I want to get something else, mention what policies or practices you would promote to balance these multiple uses to ensure the long-term health of forests and grasslands?
I'll try to be brief. That's a really big question, Senator. Multiple use is super important. All of the people in America own our forests and grasslands, and they all have different ideas about how they should be used, and we need to find ways to balance all of the uses: recreation, timber production, clean air and water, which sometimes involves non-production in areas, oil and gas and forage. There are lots of things that we need to balance, and we just need to always be mindful of everyone else's position. I find that when we get into negotiation, when I get into negotiation frequently, it's important to to learn what the other person wants and not to worry too much about my own personal needs.
Okay. The Senator Risch mentioned that you had, as a land owner, and has had some disagreements about easements with the Forest Service near your Idaho ranch. And could you talk about these disagreements briefly? You can follow up in writing. And how will you respond to those that may disagree with your positions or decisions, including employees or members of the public?
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. That is a long conversation potentially, but briefly.
Well, Senator Risch opened the door.
He did.
Yes.
He did, and he's aware of some things that have happened that have been difficult for me and some that I felt were oppressive. because I've talked to him about those. But I think one of the important things to point out is that I don't have disputes with the Forest Service. He did use that word, but I would disagree with that. As a landowner, I have had disagreements from time to time with the Forest Service. Typically, they've been very aggressive at the beginning of those disagreements. And eventually, when they got the facts and when we talked through it and we had reasonable discussions, we've always come around to a settlement that works for everyone. And to be very clear about easements, if I may just have a moment, there's a scenic easement on a ranch that I live on, and I have never had a violation or even a suggestion that I violated. Well, I've had one suggestion, but it was clear that it didn't happen and it was retracted. I haven't had violations of that easement.
Okay.
Ever.
Just last, very quickly, will you commit to not interfering with, and in fact recusing yourself from any existing or future matters involving properties that you, your family members, or your friends own or are affiliated with the Forest Service?
Senator, I have had incredibly detailed discussions with USDA ethics attorneys, who, by the way, are amazing, and I will commit to making sure they always know everything about anything that could be a conflict of interest that I can tell them, and to always following their advice.
Okay. Thank you.
Senator Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for coming in and visiting with me earlier. And one of the things we talked about was access in the grasslands, and that's incredibly important. You've been a rancher all your life, although you've been involved in other pursuits as well, obviously. But you understand it, I think, from a rancher's perspective. Talk to me about the importance of access for those ranchers that are in the grazing associations on the grasslands.
Senator, I have been involved in access ideas and issues for much of my life. It's a really important part of my life for people to have access to their properties and to public land, to be able to use that land appropriately. And there are often differences of opinion about how to approach that. And my opinion is that the Forest Service is the servant of the people in managing the assets of the people, known as the national forests and grasslands. And we need to, if I happen to be confirmed by you, the Forest Service should always remember that it's a service organization for the benefit of the people, today's people and future generations, and should be careful to consider the importance of access to the forests or access to people's grazing leases or grasslands as being of paramount importance.
I'm not sure how it works in every state, but in our state, that means we have to have access to the section lines. Will you work with us to make sure that we have access, our grazers have access to those section lines so they can access their herds in the grasslands?
I will commit to working with you to resolve that issue. I can't promise you that I will make sure it happens, but I will do my best.
Okay. But you understand the need for access and the importance of access through the section lines.
It's
and you're willing
extremely
to work with us?
important, and I agree.
Okay. Grazing agreements. Are you going to make sure that grazing agreements for the ranchers out there are fair, practical, and workable?
Senator, yes.
Okay.
I have experience with that, not with forest grazing leases, but with state and BLM leases, and I know it's very important for both sides to work together.
How about fire control? Sometimes the ranchers, the volunteer fire departments have a huge role in the grasslands in terms of addressing fire. Most of it is these volunteer firemen. Sometimes, though, the federal government will come in and do prescribed burns when they shouldn't, high winds or whatever. Are you willing to work and make sure that that doesn't happen, that the federal government is working with the Forest Service, is working with the ranchers on the ground when it comes to things like controlled burns and other issues?
Senator Hoven, thank you. That's an area that's important to me. I've been involved with a volunteer fire department and worked with the Forest Service on fires, and I think it's very important to work together. It's very important if you're ever going to do a prescribed burn, to make sure everyone knows about it. And the other thing is, I think we can be a little more careful about how and when we do prescribed burns.
Have you been out in the grasslands and seen some of the landscapes where the prairie dogs have taken over and it looks like the moon? Lunar landscape?
I have, Senator.
Do you think that's appropriate?
I don't like it. I think there are solutions and we should pursue them.
Right, and just reasonable solutions like a reasonable buffer so that if somebody has private land, they don't have a prairie dog infestation that they can't control. That's not fair to individual ranchers or grazers, is it?
I think that, yes, I think that's correct. That should happen, and it's not fair. And I think that it's the same thing for prairie dogs as other infestations like weeds. There should be a buffer zone.
Glad you mentioned that. Weed control is really important. We've got noxious weeds. The assistant director at the Forest Service, or deputy director, Chris French, has been really good about working with us on addressing noxious weeds, which is a huge issue. So one, I want to commend him and ask for your help and your support, continued support, in addressing noxious weeds. And I can't imagine why everybody couldn't agree that that just makes common sense.
Senator, thank you. I will offer you my support, and I agree it makes common sense. And I will say that in my home area, the Forest Service does a really good job of encouraging ranchers to control the weeds on their own property. And I think it's good to have that be reciprocal.
Yeah, right. You said that just right. Thank you very much.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Boren, for being here. I appreciate it. I know you grew up, you mentioned with your dad working in the Forest Service, and I know you've got exposure to the forest risk or the fire risk that we're all dealing with. And in Colorado, there's huge amounts of concern about how dangerous things are. And I have a lot of concern about what the purpose of the Trump administration's decision to move fire suppression out of the Forest Service is meant to accomplish at a moment when the last thing we need, I think, is to make it more confusing, especially we're thinking about the current wildfire season that we're facing right now. And I wasn't clear from your answer to Senator Klobuchar whether you supported that change, whether you said you had some questions of your own. I have some questions. I wonder what questions you do have about how to do it, because I'm not sure. I mean, I think maybe there's a philosophical view out there in the world that separating fire suppression from mitigation and from wildfire restoration, all that stuff is a good idea philosophically. On the ground, I'm not sure, especially in a world where people have come to work together so well with local communities, volunteer fire departments, the work that your dad did at the fire center out there. Could you talk a little bit about that in this context and how you're going to, when you become in charge of the Forest Service, the degree to which you'll pay attention to the question of whether this is a good idea or not a good idea, I guess.
Senator, thank you. I guess the answer is I'm certainly willing to look at that idea and consider it, and I can understand on my own without getting into details or being told by anyone in the administration yet, and since I'm not there, I haven't been. I can see reasons why it's a good idea to have an agency that's focused on fire, where there's a person at the head of the agency that can be held fully responsible. And to be clear, responsibility is a good thing. Consequences are a good thing. They help shape our decisions. And so I can see where there's maybe some value and hope in that, and that might be part of what's driving it. But I have to say I just don't have the facts yet to really understand all of the reasons behind it. However, I will commit to you that managing fire so that it doesn't cause so many health problems and economic problems to our country and problems to the forest is very important to me. It will be a major focus.
And I think I do think, thank you, I appreciate that. I think it's important for the American people and the taxpayer to understand that fighting these fires costs 6 times or 9 times more than doing the restoration on the front end, doing the mitigation on the front end. These are in that sense, they're related questions, because I hate to say it, but given the conditions, we may find ourselves paying one way or another, which is why it is so important, I think, to coordinate this work, and it is very important for the people, I think, for the people that are suppressing the fires to be able to understand and give advice to the people that are doing the work on the front end as we think about how to take care of these landscapes and protect the infrastructure and our water infrastructure in particular. Can you just respond to that or comment?
Yeah, I think that's a really insightful comment, Senator. And I think you're actually underestimating when you say 6 to 9 times, because you're talking about the tangible costs. And the health costs to America of the wildland fires that we've had is ridiculously high and overlooked. And I can tell you, I've read some of the studies on that from university professors and other organizations, and the health risk to Americans, especially young Americans, is very high. The health risk to our cattle herds is very high, and none of that's in your 6 to 9 times number. So it's a really expensive thing. It's much better to be proactive, to take care of our forests so that we don't end up with the results of firefighters. And here's another thing that isn't included in those costs: the damage to our watersheds.
Yeah, that's what.
Which is amazingly huge. And I see it firsthand in our neighborhood, because we've had some really big fires. We've had pristine wilderness rivers that haven't recovered in 20 years.
Yeah. Well, that's my major concern. Every single watershed we have is downstream of these forests. I mean, downhill and downstream. And that means that every single farm and ranch is downstream, every single community, no matter how big and no matter how small. I mean, really, the entire American West, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say the entire American West is at risk. And we can't undo lots of decisions that have been made up until this moment, I suppose. But we are going to have to find a way to work together in an urgent way to mitigate the risk that we are facing. And I completely agree that I think we've got to make important investments on the front end to try to mitigate not just the cost of fires, but the destruction that they can cause to our watersheds. Because without those watersheds, we don't have a Colorado.
I couldn't agree more, Senator.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much for being here today and your willingness to serve. And I'm really glad that Stevie is here today. We don't get very many little girls in here. So glad that you're here today, Stevie. You know, in Mississippi, we call ourselves the wood basket of the nation, and you and I had a really good visit about that. But we play a critical role in the U.S. timber supply. We're uniquely positioned just to meet the growing meat demands of the timber needs here in the wood products, but we also ship them through our ports. Our port at the Gulf of America and down on the Mississippi River as well. But even in challenging times, public and private forests in Mississippi have been at the forefront of common sense forest management that helped keep us healthy, working, and productive. In the next Farm Bill and through the Fix Our Forest Acts, which are currently being considered by the committee, we hope to create more opportunities to support this industry that's very critical to my state and to improve the essential tools that we need at the Forest Service to increase the pace and scale of active forest management in Mississippi and across the country. If confirmed, how do you plan to approach the management within the agency, especially when it comes to streamlining projects and the approvals of that, coordinating with state and local partners, and making sure decisions keep on-the-ground realities in mind?
Senator Hyde-Smith, one of the things that I intend to do is learn more about Mississippi and how you've accomplished the things you've accomplished, because some of the projects that you've been involved in Mississippi and some of the things that are going on in the forests in Mississippi are truly revolutionary and should be applied throughout the country. And I appreciate your example as a state. But really, I think what it comes down to is we have large tasks ahead of us with the Forest Service in all the areas you mentioned, and we need coordination with other entities, both state agencies, but also user groups and other organizations that want to put skin in the game and be helpful. And I think that, that can be a really, really good thing as we have not all the resources that we need. But one thing we need is help from senators and representatives. And you pointed out that we have a need for streamlining what we do.
Yeah.
And there's some things that we probably can't streamline without streamlining some of our acts of Congress that might need a little tweaking so that they work appropriately, both for protection of the environment, because one of the things that's important to us is long-term health of the forests and sustainability of their usability for the people. So, that's important, but also being able to get the right things done at the right time on the ground. And a good example of that would be after a fire, it's really important to use that timber now rather than wait and try and sell it in 3 or 4 years when it has no value. And there's some things you could do to help us with that.
And we'll be glad to do it. In Mississippi, it's called hard work. Our successes are because of hard work and some really good programs with people willing to invest and people willing to commit. But, we've been working on one particular issue for decades now, and I had the opportunity to mention that to you, namely developing the area around Lake Okissa in Franklin County, Mississippi. It's in the Homochitto National Forest. It's in southwest Mississippi. Mm-hmm. Beautiful area, so much potential, 1,100-acre pristine lake down there. And it was built in the 1990s is when it was built. But you can fish all day long by yourself almost, and you can ski by yourself. We've got to develop something to capitalize on the potential around that area. In the 2018 Farm Bill, we worked really hard to include a provision that transferred 150 acres of the Homochitto National Forest land to support economic development. And we're beginning to see that pay off significantly since that's signed into law. And we're very excited about that project. Some really good announcements just lately on that. But the goal of this effort is to enable smart, locally driven development that complements the natural resources and increases public access that you have mentioned. And I look forward to continuing working with this committee in supporting economic development in this very, very rural area of Mississippi. 2 small towns, one of them has a red light, the other one doesn't. But Mr. Boren, please share how you view this kind of targeted land transfer for economic development and what kind of support the Forest Service could provide to ensure the success of this project, and both for the community and maintaining stewardship of the surrounding Homochitto National Forest lands.
Thank you for the opportunity to address that, Senator. I have to correct you from my personal point of view, though, which is I don't want to fish by myself when I've got 9 grandkids that like to fish. So it's nice to have some friends, even if you have to create them. But in terms of your project at Lake Okissa, I think it's brilliant. I think it's replicable. I think it's the kind of thing that we need to try to do throughout our forests to increase access and use of the forests. I don't know that we would have to do it just the way you did it, but the idea is really important to give people opportunities to benefit from the use of the forests. And I look forward to, I mentioned to your staff that I would love to learn more about that project, and I mean it. I look forward to coming to your office and meeting with them and learning how we can replicate that elsewhere.
I'd love for you to come to Mississippi, and I'll take you to Lake Okissa.
Well, as long as I don't have to land at what did you call it, the Brookdale Triangle? Because that's a scary place from what I hear. I'm happy to come.
We'll leave that right there. Thank you.
Well, thank you again for appearing before the committee, Mr. Boren. And to our committee members, for their participation in today's important hearing. Again, as always, to our staffs that do so much work getting these things ready. The record will remain open for 2 business days. Today's hearing is now adjourned.